Hello, nice to meet you. This is Kim Ki-hyun from Richgo. It's time to talk about Gyeongnam and Gyeongbuk. The weather has become quite cool, and it seems like the scent of autumn is slowly starting to appear. I wonder how your meals have been. First, let's move to the Gyeongnam region. Now, September is just around the corner, and the stressed DSR second phase is set to be fully implemented in September. If you look here. Where is Gyeongnam? Ah, here it is. Let me change the price to reflect a 5-month period. Now Gyeongnam is here, and if you look at Gyeongnam, it is currently declining. It is no longer moving to the left, which means that the sales prices are now almost stagnant, while the Jeonse prices are dropping. At the bottom, we see Sejong, which has experienced the largest drop in Jeonse prices. Jeju Island, which is furthest to the left, has seen the most significant decrease in sales prices. As for Seoul, it continues to rise steadily until August. Incheon is also on the rise, and Gyeonggi province is still increasing, although it has slightly dipped. So, the Jeon's prices have shown a slight decline compared to July. Looking at the investment score for Gyeongnam, it is the second best after Chungnam, with a score of 72.5. Therefore, Gyeongnam is currently just below the knee level, indicating that it is a good time to start preparing to purchase a home. Generally, we say that investment is always about things that others are not interested in. Currently, places that are not very favorable are expected to undergo positive changes, making it a great time for us to secure our own homes. Recently, the real estate market shows that the metropolitan area is doing well, while the provinces are not. But I believe that the golden age for the provinces will begin next year. Of course, not all areas are considered provinces, but I think that starting next year, some regions will significantly improve. Looking at Gyeongnam, the Jeonse prices are currently undervalued, which is not very good. The sales prices are about 3.6% lower than the Jeonse prices, indicating that the sales prices are somewhat overvalued, but this level of overvaluation is not excessive. Next, let's look at the Housing Purchase Burden Index. How is it now? Looking at this, it seems that 2011 was indeed overvalued. Those who remember this period might not know, but the metropolitan area was not doing well, while the provinces were better off at that time. However, the burden index for housing purchases in Gyeongnam was very high during this period. It almost broke through a certain point during the financial crisis and has now dropped a bit. Currently, it stands at around 72, with the average being 73. The historical low point, which I referred to as a good time to invest in the provinces, was in the fall of 2019 and early 2020, around 60. If we look at that time, it was about 66. So, around 66 or 65 can be considered almost the first bottom. In extreme cases, it could drop even further. But for now, let's consider it around 65. This means it is about 10% overvalued. However, it could still drop to around 58, which would be a 19% decrease. Therefore, we can say it is overvalued by about 10% to a maximum of 20% in the case of Gyeongnam. There is a possibility that prices could drop by up to 20%, which we can see through the data. Gyeongnam is now more expensive than Chungbuk, with Chungbuk at 69.9 and Gyeongnam at 71.6. Therefore, excluding the metropolitan cities, Gyeongnam is the most expensive region among the provinces. Additionally, Jeonse prices have also decreased significantly, reducing the burden of purchasing rental housing. When looking at the price-to-income ratio, PIR, in relation to income, it was once 5.4 times in 2011, which was nearly the peak, slightly below 5.5 times. However, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it rose to 6.5 times before coming back down to around 5 times. Currently, it is about 4.5 times, which can be considered nearly the bottom. This level is similar to that of around 2010. So if it drops by about 0.5, the PIR indicates that it is overvalued by about 10%. Therefore, in the case of Gyeongnam, even a 10% reduction in the bubble would make it very favorable for home purchasing. Thus, we can conclude that there is not much of a bubble in Gyeongnam right now. And what does it mean that there is about a 10% bubble? Can we approach it through auctions or not? We can approach it through auctions, right? So, shall we take a look at the auctions for a moment? Looking at the current auction properties in Gyeongnam, as you can see, they are continuously increasing. The number of apartments is increasing and there are quite a few available. With nearly 500 apartments in Gyeongnam, I recommend considering purchasing a home through an apartment. On the other hand, the number of office towers increased significantly, but has recently seen a decline. In the case of commercial properties, they continue to increase. The real issue is actually with commercial real estate. As you can see, it is growing much more than during the period of high interest rates. And I believe that these issues will become more serious in the future. Therefore, it seems that there is a significantly negative atmosphere in the commercial real estate market. It is said that self-employment is also in very bad shape. So for those who want to purchase a home in Gyeongnam, what should they do? If you look at it this way, there really isn't much time left. We're very close to the bottom. Also, the bank interest rates are very different from before. Since 2015, the bank interest rates have been below 2% continuously. However, now the bank interest rates have increased significantly to 3.5%. In the past, the rental yield for apartments was much higher than the bank interest rates, but now it is only slightly higher than the bank interest rates. So, what does this indicate? Currently, there is quite a significant bubble in the real estate market nationwide. I believe that this bubble needs to burst for real estate to regain its status as an asset worthy of investment. If decisions are made under the influence of the artificial atmosphere created by the government, it could lead to serious consequences later on. In about 1 to 2 years, you will likely feel the weight of my words. Now, looking at the John's price ratio, it stands at 73.7%, which is not a particularly high level. A low John's price ratio indicates that it is not easy to engage in gap investment. However, even with a ratio of around 74%, gap investment can still be feasible. Next, when we look at the supply volume, in the case of Gyeongnam, there will be none after 2025. Therefore, for last year, this year, and next year, the average supply volume is present, but it will decrease in just 3 months. Let's take a look at this on a quarterly basis to see how it changes. So, when we look at it quarterly, what do we see? In the first quarter of 2025, a significant amount of supply, exceeding 10,000 units, will come into Gyeongnam. What does that mean? I mentioned that Gyeongnam's apartment prices could drop by about 10%, and in extreme cases by around 20%. Therefore, I believe that a correction of about 10% could occur in the first quarter of next year, 2025. Generally speaking, while there are some regional differences, I assess that the period from the first to the second quarter of next year could be a very good time to buy apartments in Gyeongnam. Additionally, if you look here, the areas with the least supply are Sejong, Jeju Island, Gyeongnam, Ulsan, Daegu, and Seoul. This means you should pay attention to areas with low supply, and it's essential to consider the surrounding regions that are close to workplaces for more accurate decision making. Regarding unsold properties, there has been a slight increase again. I believe that after the first or second quarter of next year, the number of unsold properties will decrease again. The situation regarding unsold properties in the provinces is quite serious, so I think that if the government provides various benefits for unsold properties in the provinces, it could positively impact the activation of the local real estate market. Now, looking at the supply and demand, Gyeongnam is located here on the left side, indicating a significant presence. The supply and demand for sales is not very good, and although it is slightly above, it is coming down a bit. So, the supply and demand for Johns is not bad, but it is not extremely strong either. The sales market is still, as you can see, not very good. Let me take a historical look at this. So, what do you think? At that time, you can see that the supply and demand were quite good in 2014, 2015, and 2016. However, in 2018, I mentioned in my first book that Gyeongnam was one of the areas that was not doing well. As you can see, Gyeongnam was not in a good state, and starting from the latter half of 2019, I began discussing local real estate investments. As you can see, the supply and demand improved significantly, leading to a tremendous surge. As you can see now, the current supply and demand situation is somewhat stagnant. So far, the situation is just average. But as I mentioned, I foresee that starting from the first and second quarters of next year, it could significantly improve. Now, regarding the Jeonsi supply and demand, it has been slightly increasing, but is currently at an average historical level and is somewhat stagnant. However, with a large number of new move-ins expected in the first quarter of next year, the Jeon's supply and demand will likely drop again towards the end of this year and early next year. Therefore, for those who want to buy a home in Gyeongnam, it might be better to wait a little longer until the first or second quarter of next year. Next, we have the Gyeongnam Sales and Jeon's Index, which, as you can see, has improved slightly, but is still not at a level that can be considered good. Furthermore, public real estate agents also believe that Gyeongnam will improve a bit. It is somewhat difficult to push Gyeongnam up, but it is showing a slight upward trend, although it is still below 100. It needs to be above 100 to indicate an increase, and it doesn't seem to have reached that point yet. Lastly, as you can see in Gyeongnam, the population and household numbers in the flower chart are rising. But what is happening now? It is completely falling down, like a waterfall pouring downwards. What does this story mean? Since 2018, Gyeongnam has been experiencing a continuous decline in population, while the number of households has only increased. If we look at the last 2 years, Gyeongnam is almost at the bottom in terms of population change, ranking third, worst in the country. This means that the population is decreasing significantly. Over the past 2 years, Gyeongnam has lost 60,000 people. While the population has decreased considerably, the number of households is still increasing, which is somewhat fortunate. As I have always mentioned, in about 10 years, we will likely see a decrease in the number of households as well, and at that time, the real estate market will change dramatically. Now, in the case of Gyeongnam, the average age is quite high at 46 years. Gyeongnam has the highest average age at 49, while Sejong and Gyeonggi province can be considered relatively younger cities. Looking at job opportunities over the past year, Gyeongnam shows a slight increase, indicating that jobs are growing a bit. Gyeongnam, Gyeongbuk, and especially Ulsan are showing significant growth in job opportunities. In Gyeongnam, the companies with the most job openings are Samsung Heavy Industries, Hanwha Ocean, and the Korea Land and Housing Corporation, as well as the aerospace industry located in Sacheon. Additionally, Hyundai Rotem, located in Seongsan-gu, is experiencing a significant increase in job opportunities. It seems that defense stocks are quite popular these days. As there are many conflicts around the world, the defense industry is fairly present in Gyeongnam. So from that perspective, I believe there is a high possibility that the real estate market in Gyeongnam will improve starting next year. Now, let's take a look at Gyeongbuk. The investment score for Gyeongbuk is slightly lower than that of Gyeongnam, at 65 points. It's about the size of a thigh, since it's between the waist and the knee, so it's roughly the size of a thigh, which isn't bad. Now, the Jeonse price evaluation for Gyeongbuk is currently at minus 3.6%, while the historical average is around plus 1.2%. Looking at it this way, Gyeongbuk is currently undervalued compared to Jeonse, and this is the worst it has been since 2017. Next, let's take a look at the Housing Purchase Burden Index, which is a bit different from Gyeongnam. In the case of Gyeongbuk, the current value is 55. The average value is 54. And what is the lowest point? I think this is about the bottom. Around 48 to 50, it doesn't happen that often. So below 50, it would be perfectly fine to buy an apartment in Gyeongbuk. It's less than 10%. What does this mean? It means there is really no bubble. Now let me pose a question. Is there more of a bubble in Gyeongbuk or in Gyeongnam? Where is there more of a bubble? Looking at the data, Gyeongbuk seems to be a bit better than Gyeongnam. So, it is less overvalued, right? Therefore, Gyeongbuk might drop by about 10% at most, while Gyeongnam could potentially drop by up to 20%, as you saw earlier. So, for Gyeongbuk, it would be great to approach it through auctions. Let's take a look. Commercial real estate in Gyeongbuk is continuously increasing, but there are really not many apartments. There are hardly any apartments, maybe around 100 cases. There are just over 100 cases, a little more than that. Earlier we mentioned that in Gyeongnam there were quite a few, around 500 cases, which is a significant number. However, it seems that Gyeongbuk does not have as many auction properties. So you can see that Gyeongbuk does not have that many auction items. Now, looking at the price to income ratio, PIR, it is currently at 3.9. The previous low was 3.7. So we are almost at the bottom. Of course, if there were to be an extreme economic crisis, or something similar, it could drop further, but that would be an extreme case. I think we have almost reached the bottom. Next, Gyeongbuk has a better rental yield than anyone else, much better than Gyeongnam. Gyeongnam has a yield of 3.8%, while Gyeongbuk has 4.3%. So, it seems that the monthly rental yield for apartments in Gyeongbuk is better. The Jeonse price is 77%, which is much higher than in Gyeongnam, indicating that it is a region where gap investments can be made. The supply of move-in properties is also very good. Looking at this year, there are quite a few move-ins. But what about next year? And the year after? There will be very few move-in properties, right? In the case of Gyeongbuk, the burden of supply will likely diminish significantly after this year. If we look at this quarterly, it will become clear. In the fourth quarter of this year, after approximately 7,000 units are supplied in the fourth quarter of 2024, there will be almost no concerns about supply volume. Thereafter, especially after the fourth quarter of next year, there will be virtually none. So, in the case of Gyeongbuk, the supply volume will almost be finished after the fourth quarter of this year. So, whether it's Gyeongnam or Gyeongbuk, I think it would be good to pay some attention to buying around the end of this year or the beginning of next year, and to observe the market. In the case of Gyeongbuk, the number of unsold properties is gradually decreasing, which appears to be a positive situation. Now, in the case of Gyeongbuk, the supply and demand for sales was completely heated up in 2013, and it continued until around 2015. However, from 2016 to 2019, including the autumn of 2019, the market was not good. After that, it heated up again for a few years, but starting from July 2022, the sales market has been quite poor. Therefore, it is assessed that the market is still somewhat frozen. Looking at the Jeonse supply and demand, it is not very high, but once the supply of new units comes in during the fourth quarter of this year, the supply will decrease significantly. Thus, I hope that the Jeonse supply and demand will improve again starting next year. So what about the buying sentiment and the Jeonse sentiment? Earlier, Gyeongnam was here, but Gyeongbuk is over here, so it suddenly shifted to the right. What does it mean that it shifted to the right? It means that the buying sentiment has suddenly improved. People are starting to feel that it might be okay to buy apartments in Gyeongbuk, so the sentiment is getting better. The Jeonse market, on the other hand, is still relatively stable. Now, the perspective of the certified real estate agent is a bit higher than that of Gyeongnam. So where is Gyeongbuk? It seems to be around here. It seems that Gyeongnam is currently in this direction. The brokers are also starting to believe that the apartments in Gyeongnam will improve a bit more in 3 months compared to now. Looking at the population and household numbers, they are continuously declining. Let's look at the last 2 years. So if we consider this, the region with the largest population decline is Gyeongbuk, which is losing nearly 70,000 people, followed by Jeonbuk and Gyeongnam. When we see this, it doesn't look very positive. The population is continuously decreasing while the number of households is increasing and decreasing. This is the current situation. Next, regarding jobs, Gyeongbuk is also showing a red light. Jobs are increasing, although not significantly. Major employers in Gyeongbuk include POSCO and Korea Water Resources Corporation, which are located in Gyeongju, as well as Korea Expressway Corporation and POSCO ENC. So we have briefly reviewed this. Now let's take a look at the price charts for Gyeongnam and Gyeongbuk to see how prices are moving. I will select both Gyeongnam and Gyeongbuk, and then I will choose the year 2024.